The Rebel just got our hands on the briefing notes prepared for Trudeau and his inner circle about how best to deal with all the fallout from the boy blender's outlandish trip to India in 2018. From what I can tell in these documents, I think the rest of us experienced this trip much differently than Trudeau and his handlers did. Remember when Prime Minister Trudeau went on a week-long junket to India and the entire nation cringed in unison? Trudeau was dancing and prancing and eating and partying and namaste handsing his way across the subcontinent, all on the taxpayer dime and working hard to annoy roughly 1.35 billion people and damage the good working relationship with Prime Minister Modi that Stephen Harper worked so hard to build. I wanted to know what the government thought of their own performance in India. So we asked for their assessment of the trip in a manner of speaking. I wanted all their talking points. And we just received 158 exclusive pages of Privy Council briefing notes related to the ill-fated trip. These are the media lines and talking points prepared by professional spin doctors employed by the Liberal government, all meant to help Trudeau and those around him deal with the international firestorm and global embarrassment caused by Trudeau's behavior on that taxpayer-funded family vacation in India. According to the briefing notes, the purpose of Trudeau's trip to India was to advance growth and prosperity, sustainable development, defense and security, and, of course, women's economic empowerment. The trip also provided an opportunity to advance Canadian trade interests, showcase people-to-people ties, and deepen Canada-India relations through commercial ties that contribute to mutual growth and prosperity. Let's stop right here for a second. Pretty sure Trudeau failed on all of these objectives, especially on trade issues, since days after Trudeau came home from India, Canadian pulse crop farmers were slapped with trade tariffs from the Indian government. And Trudeau, well, he couldn't have bungled the security goals of his visit any worse if he tried, since he imported a literal terrorist, an attempted assassin of an Indian minister, a man named Jaspal Atwal, into India, and the Canadian taxpayer paid for his trip. Also, what on earth does people-to-people even mean? Let's get right into this document package, though, because the prepared talking points here are quite bizarre, delusional even. It's like the Liberals and their spin doctors watched a different trip unfold than we did, and I guess the rest of the world did too. Page 6 has a note on how to respond to questions about Trudeau's catering bill for flights. I think at home you'll appreciate how they try to minimize costs, but that sometimes local retailers just don't have the kinds of stuff the Trudeaus require. It reads, efforts are made to minimize catering costs when purchasing menu items from local catering companies. However, the options are sometimes quite limited at overseas airports. Minimize costs? Yeah, no. I know the Liberals are sparing no costs on themselves when they fly high in luxury. This is from one of my own exclusive investigations. Trudeau rang up $384,000 in food and liquor on only 5 flights in late 2018. I also have investigated the liquor costs for the India trip. On the Delhi leg of Trudeau's humiliating and ill-fated trip to India, arrangements were made for 44 bottles of wine and 12 cans of beer to be served at a dinner for just 40 people. The only availability issue these people were worried about was making sure Trudeau's special by-request vodka was always on hand. On page 13, the spin doctors brag about how they talked to the Indians about integrating gender perspectives into international security and defense. Defense and security relations. We discussed integrating gender perspectives into peace and security activities and interventions in line with the Women, Peace and Security agenda, including prevention of conflict-related sexual violence. To expand security cooperation, we welcomed a new bilateral framework for cooperation on countering terrorism and violent extremism and agreed to hold regular meetings of the bilateral counterterrorism working group. Countering terrorism, you say. Trudeau imported a literal murderous terrorist, someone who has indeed committed acts against the Indian government, into India, and even worse, Trudeau then went on to try to blame the Indian government for the whole catastrophe. But Trudeau wants us to know he came to lecture the Indians about fighting terrorism. Gotcha. Page 14 explains that Trudeau had to go to all those tourist attractions to highlight people-to-people and cultural linkages. Look at this. We visited cultural and historical sites to highlight people-to-people and cultural linkages, as well as our shared values of democracy, diversity, tolerance, pluralism, and the rule of law. I don't know about you, but I can really feel the democracy coming at me right here. Still on page 14, the spinners are bragging about meetings with Indian Prime Minister Modi. This is a talking point prepared for Trudeau to utter if he was ever asked. My meetings with Prime Minister Modi, members of his cabinet, and President Kovind were close and productive. These meetings provided an occasion to reflect on our growing trade and economic relations, consult on important security issues, and work to strengthen important people-to-people ties. I'm so sick of that phrase. Productive, by the way, and meetings as in plural. Trudeau and Modi met just once on one of the very last days of the visit. Again, all this after Trudeau invited a terrorist and acted like a buffoonish tourist in Modi's country for an entire week. And then Canadian farmers got slapped with pulse tariffs. Page 15, we see talking points on the invite of an Indian-Canadian chef who happens to be on the selection panel to select Liberal senators to cook Indian food for the Prime Minister while in India, a move some saw as insulting and, of course, standard Liberal cronyism. Responsive on involvement of Chef Vikram. Vij's unique melding of Canadian and Indian cuisine contributed to a celebration of the unique Canada-India friendship at official events. Vij was a friendship broker, okay? Not a rich, longtime Liberal supporter on a free trip courtesy of you and me. Page 16-17, this is a post-trip briefing note prepared for Trudeau, including sections on coverage for stuff like the wardrobe. And the media stories section is fun, where Trudeau is reminded he was snubbed in India as the whole world looked on. When you were met by the junior Minister of Agriculture, it was perceived negatively by the media and on social media platforms. CNN ran the headline, Justin Trudeau snubbed by Indian government on official trip, while the National Post ran, the world is wondering whether Justin Trudeau just got snubbed in India. And Trudeau also gets reminded that the Indians lost patience with his dress-up playtime in their country as the trip wore on. It stopped being cute for them and started being obnoxious. The Trudeau family attire for the visit was chosen in accordance with visits to cultural, historical, and holy sites. Both conventional media and social media channels ran stories on wardrobe choices. The initial media response was positive, calling wardrobe choices festive and resplendent. Over time, the media became more critical. Outlets like the BBC ran headlines such as Justin Trudeau's Bollywood wardrobe amuses Indians, and CTV News reported that critics say Trudeau's Indian attire is a bit much. Apparently, according to these spin docs, the trip was a smashing success until some meanies, including actual Bollywood stars who complained Trudeau was more Bollywood than Bollywood, decided to be negative Nellies. Page 126, we have an email suggesting it was actually a Liberal cabinet minister, not the Liberal MP they blamed, who invited that aforementioned terrorist, Jaspal Atwal, over to India. The individual was apparently placed on the guest list by a minister, not known which. A minister, and not that inconsequential backbencher, Randeep Sarai, that the PMO first blamed to make the whole issue go away. Even worse, we now know that the final report on the Atwal fiasco says the PMO signed off on his attendance. So the Liberals, as they were crafting their Atwal lies, couldn't even keep their story straight. Just like Trudeau's sexual groping, I guess we can also experience India trips differently than he does. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. What you just saw there is an example of the daily work that I do here at The Rebel. I'm an accountability journalist, and that's why I'm being targeted by Rachel Notley's holdovers in the Alberta government. I wrote a book that was critical of the government of the day, and now I'm being investigated by appointees of that very same government. To see the full story, go to savesheila.com, and if you can help me cover my legal costs to fight back, you can do that too there at savesheila.com.